We're on Daf Vav Amid Aleph, and we're up to Mafrishin Kohen Gadol. And now the Gemara is going back to the Mishnah. It's about 9 lines down from the top of the Amud. And the Mishnah says that we take the Kohen Gadol out of his house and we quarantine him for 7 days before Yom Kippur. And we bring him into a place called the Lishkas Farhedrin. So the Gemara asks what seems to be a very naive question. Lama Mafrishin. Why are we separating the Kohen Gadol? Why are we taking him out of his house? And the Gemara immediately asks, what do you mean Lama Mafrishin? Kidakam Rinam. We have a machlokes between Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish, back on Daf Beis. And Markinisle. According to Rabbi Yochanan, we're mafresh the Kohen Gadol before Yom Kippurim, as we derive from the Miluim, that just like Aaron and Banav had to separate from their homes in order to prepare for that Rosh Chodesh Nisan, the beginning of the Avodas HaMishkan, so too the Kohen Gadol, and we saw Ribui in the parsha of Miluim to include the Kohen Gadol for all Doros in the same kind of requirement of Prisha. And Iludas Reish Lakish, Kida Islay, back on Daf Gimel and Beis, we had Reish Lakish who derives Hafrashas Kohen Gadol from Sinai. That just like Moshe Rabbeinu had to prepare to go into the Machne Shechina when he climbed up to the mountain to receive the Luchos Habris, so too the Kohen Gadol, who's going to go Lifnai V'Lifnim into the Machne Shechina, into the Kodesh Kadosh, and he has to prepare. So what exactly were you asking over here? I mean, what don't you know that we've already established? Achikam, this is what the Shoel was asking. Bibeso Lama Perish. I understand that he has to go into the Lishkas Farhedrin to prepare. And there, they're going to teach him. He's going to get well trained and well oiled to prepare for the Avodas Yom Kippur. Nicha, that I understand. But why did it have to be Mafreshim mi Beso, meaning from Ishto? Why can't he invite his wife to spend that week together with him in the Lishkas Farhedrin, all expenses paid? It's a very nice hotel. And he's there on vacation with his wife. And he could have intimate relations. I mean, here there's a whole discussion about exactly where the Lishkas Farhedrin was located. Because if you're going to say that the Lishkas Farhedrin, and that's a simple shot, was located in the Azara, then, you know, there's no heter for intimate relations in the Azara. But it's clear that you cannot say that it was also L'shamish mitasa b'Lishkas Farhedrin, namely that it's invested with the status of Kedushas Azara. And that's impossible because when the Kohen Gadol goes to Lishkas Farhedrin for 7 days, he's got to sleep there. And you can't go 7 days without sleeping. And the halacha is that you're not allowed to sleep or rest or recline in the Azara. And that's a sugya later on in Yoma and Daf Chaf Hey, Yeshiva B'Azara, Muteres Rak L'Melech, L'Malchei Beis David. So certainly you're not allowed to have relations in the Azara. So it must be that the Lishkas Farhedrin didn't have the total Kedusha of the Azara. Maybe it opened up into the Azara, but it didn't have full-fledged Kedusha Azara. So the Gemara wants to know why did he have to be Paresh Me'ishto? And our answer is based on a Brisa. Tanya, we learned in a Brisa, Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira Omer, the reason why Kohen Gadol has to be Paresh Me'ishto for 7 days before Yom Kippurim is Shema Timotzei Ishto Sofek Nida V'yavo Oleho. Maybe a situation will arise in which he's not sure whether or not his wife is a Nida. And he goes ahead and he has an intimate relationship with his wife who's a Sofek Nida. And now he becomes Tomei for 7 days because a Boel Nida has the same status as a Nida, or at least close to the same status as a Nida. And that's based on a pasuk in Vayikra Tesvav, where the Torah says, "V'im chachav yishkav ish osa utehi nidasa olav v'tonei shivas yamim." So on the tzad that he would have had relations with his wife, who's a suffix nida, then he's not going to be qualified for the avoda because a boel nida contracts tumah of shivas yamim, and that would disqualify him for the avoda. Now, this doesn't make any sense. And the Gemara immediately objects. Are you telling me that the Kohen Gadol is such a rasha that he knows that his wife is a suffix nida and he would go ahead and have intimate relations with her? Impossible. We're not dealing with Rishoyim. Our Kohen Gadol is anything but a rasha. Am I correct? So how can he have a relationship with his wife? He's a suffix nida. Ella says, well, we have to slightly revamp it. Shema yavo al ishto v'timatze suffix nida. He has every reason to believe that his wife is becheskas tahora. But it could be possible that immediately after they have relations, she will do what's called a kinuach b'sadin. She'll wipe herself in the private areas with a cloth after the intimacy, and she finds down. Now, if she finds intimacy, if she finds down right after intimacy, right after bia, then it's a whole different situation. It's no longer a cheskas tahara. True, when he had bia with her, he had no reason to suspect that she would be a nida, but it could be that the very activity of the Maisa Bia caused the dam to come out of the makar, and b'shas Bia she became a nida. And if that be the case, he cannot serve in the Beis Hamikdash on Yom Kippurim because she became a nida at the moment that they had intimate relations, and a boiled nida is Tommy Chivas Yomim. Now again, you might ask, maybe we should be mafrichin from his wife for more than 7 days. No. Because we don't need a prisha of more than 7 days, because before that 7-day period, even if he would have intimacy with her, and she would turn out to be a suffix nida, by the time Yom Kippur comes around, she would be tahora, because we've given her the full 7 days plus to be tahora. But within 7 days, if he had an intimacy with her, and as it turned out, after the bia, she saw a dam, and she found the dam with a kinuach, then we have to suspect that at the time of bia, she became a nida, and he is tameh for shivas yamim. But now the Gemara says, you know what? Let's analyze this, because we're not sure exactly how long after the Maisa Bia she took that precaution and that action, and she was mekaneach b'sadin. And there are 3 different possible time periods when she did the actual kinuach. And there's a sugya in Masechet Nida on Daf Yud Daled that addresses various opinions as to how quickly, how soon, immediately after the Maisa Bia, did she do this kinuach that generates a suffix, undermine a cheskes tara, that perhaps already at the time of the bia, she had a yitzias dam and amokar, she was tmeya b'tumas nida. The Mishnah in Masechet Nida is discussing a slightly different issue. And that is what's called Nashim Ha'otzkos B'taros, which means that the women are kneading dough, and the dough has to have a cheskes tara. Now, in the case of a Kohen, we understand that he's not allowed to eat challah tmeah. But even in the case of chulin, they were very makpid at that time to be ochel chulin b'tara. Now, she is working with taros. Again, I gave the example of a loaf of bread, but it could be fruit, it could be vegetables, it could be many different possibilities. And now the Mishnah advocates that each one, the husband and the wife, should both do a checking after the bia, which is called an aid bidika, and tashmish should take place with two aiden, echad lo v'echad lo. So immediately following the relationship that they had, he checks his aid bedika, she hers, to see if there's any dam on the aid bedika. Now the din is, if they find dam on the bedika, so there are different possibilities. One possibility is that he found the dam on his aid bedika, and in such a case, if he finds dam on his aid, which means that he cleaned himself off, we assume for sure that that dam came from her body. It's not regular, it's not commonplace that a man would see dam that came out of his body. So b'vadai, we assume for sure it came out of her body and it came out b'shas bir. If, on the other hand, she finds dam on her bedika, then everything depends upon how quickly, how soon after the bia did she see dam. Now, there's something called a bedikas esyom. Esyom is a Greek word that means miyad. If she did the bedika immediately after the intercourse, meaning she didn't even have enough time to get off her bed and stand on the ground, and she immediately did a bedika, then the halacha is shneim tmeim b'vadai. They're both certainly talking. For sure, the dam came out during the bia. If, on the other hand, she delays and she doesn't do the bedika immediately, then we have what's called a suffix, and the Baal is in a situation of suffix tameh. We don't know if the dam began to come out of her makar at the time of the bia or maybe after the bia, because she didn't do a bedika immediately after the bia. Now, regarding this case of a Baal who's suffix tameh, and regarding the exact details, we have a machlokes in Masechet Nida Daf Yudal between Rabbi Akiva and the Chachamim. Amru Rabbanan Kamed Rav Chizda. So the Rabbanan presented to Rav Chizda the shita of Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira, who said that if the wife of the Kohen Gadol finds dam right after bia, the Kohen Gadol is going to be in a state of a suffix tameh. And this presentation of Rabbi Yehuda's shita was in front of Rav Chizda, and they asked Rav Chizda Kema, which of the two shitos in the following machlokes between Rabbi Akiva and the Chachamim is Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira reflected? Shall we assume here Rabbi Akiva that this shita of Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira, that the Kohen Gadol is now a suffix tameh if she finds dam after the intercourse, that reflects Rabbi Akiva the Omar, who says that if a nida sees dam, then the Chachamim instituted what's called tumal mafreh, that means me'es li es. And that means that the Chachamim assume that the dam inside a woman's body is held up. It doesn't immediately come down. Even after it left the makar, it may take as long as 24 hours until she'll actually see the dam. But the dam already left the makar 24 hours ago. And the Chachamim made a gzera, according to Rabbi Akiva, of tumal mafreya, that from the moment she sees the dam, she'll be tameh retroactively me'es li'es for a full 24 hours, which would mean, number one, that if she was osek b'taros, then all the taros that she was osekes with, all the dough that she needed in the last 24 hours, me'es li'es, are b'chezkes tameh. And that's called gzera d'Rabbanan, because we're always afraid that maybe although she saw the dam now, the dam actually came out 24 hours ago, was held up in the Bais HaChitzoni. Number two, Mitames Bol. Rabbi Akiva says that from the moment that she finds down, if he had a relationship with her within 24 hours of the time that she found the dam. So again, let's say she found the dam at time T2. Time T1 is the last 24 hours before time T2. So she found the dam after the bia that took place at time T2. Then if he had a relation with her any time within the 24 hours before that, he's tamei midin boel nida. So again, we go retroactively according to Rabbi Akiva from the moment that she finds the dam 24 hours earlier, and he became tamei when he had a relationship with her within that 24-hour period, and that's called tumas meis leis lemafreya. And now we understand very well, Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira, that if we're not poresh, the Kohen Gadol is not poresh b'ishto, then in a case where he would have intimate relations with his wife, and then she checked her aid bedika, she found dam, Rabbi Akiva would claim that since he had a relationship with her within the last 24 hours, he's tamei l'mafreya, the tum is l'mafreya. However, the ikir Rabbanon, if we're going to introduce the Rabbanon shita, then we'll have the following question to ask. Ha'amri, the Rabbanon are of the opinion, ein nida mitamias bol. We don't apply the principle of mafreya. The mafreya, the gzera b'es li'es, from the time that she found dam, going back 24 hours, is only applicable to taros. We're machmir and taros. But as far as the Baal is concerned, he has a cheskes taro. We're not going to be metamia because he had a relationship with his wife within the last 24 hours of the time that she found the dam. So therefore, what are you worried about? I don't understand Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira. He's telling us that the Eishes Kohen Gadol, if she finds dam after bia, he, the Boel, meaning the Kohen Gadol in this case, becomes a Safek Tameh. That's not true. Not according to the Chachamim. Only reflects the shita of Rabbi Akiva. We could reconcile Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira and his fear of a situation where the Eishes Kohen Gadol finds down, even according to Rabbanon. Ad kan lo pligi Rabbanon alei Rabbi Akiva ela bi acher acher, or achar acher. Machlokes is when there was a double delay from after the intercourse until she actually checked her aid bedika. Aval bechad achar, in other words, if it wasn't immediate, but it was just a minute later, she got off the bed and she immediately made a bedika. So that's not on the bed, she didn't do it immediately after the intimacy, and that's called chad achar. So when a woman sees dam achar zman habia, which is called achar achar. I'm sorry, 1 second. If she sees dam either immediately or right after immediately, then everybody agrees that she's tmeya, and the Baal is considered a safek boel nida. The machlokes between Chacham and Rabbi Akiva is only achar achar. We have 3 time periods. We have miyad, asium, and then we have the second period, which is called achar, immediately after that, and then we have achar achar. But bechad achar, if there's only achar, and she saw dam almost immediately after the bia, toch shir, she saw within a short period of time, like immediately after she got off the bed, module, then Chachamim concede, I should say, to Rabbi Akiva that the Boel is in a state of a Safek Tumah. So therefore, it could be, says Rav Chisda, that Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira is addressing a case where achar, achar, I'm sorry, not achar, because achar is going to be machlokas, chachamim, and Rabbi Kiva. But achar, maybe the case is, and that's what Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira is worried about, that achar, but not achar, she found down on the 8th. And therefore, even the Rabbanu would concede that in such a case, we have a chashash that he's tameh and he loses his cheskes tara. And that's what Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira is worried about, that maybe the Kohen Gadol, after he has an intimacy with his wife, they'll check, or she'll check her aid bedika in a shear of achar, one achar, in other words, not immediately after the biyah, but 1 second later. And therefore, even the Chacham would agree that we have to be choshesh that maybe he was boel and nida. She was already a nida at the time of the biyah, and he's a safek tameh, and therefore he cannot do the avod. Amar Rabbi Zera Shmami no. What we should learn from Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira about boel nida is that boel nida eno kinida. V'tovel bayom. That we're going to have an issue now whether or not the status of tumah, the exact tumah of a boel nida, is the exact tumah of a nida. And Rabbi Zera wants to prove from our sugya, Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira, that boel nida eno kinida. Now, what is the difference between boel nida kinida and boel nida eno kinida? The halacha is as follows: that we have 2 categories of tumah. In the classic category of tumah, you can have a tvila b'mikvah on that day when the tumah terminates, on that very day. The exception to that rule is nida. Nida could not, she has to wait 7 days, but she cannot be toveles on the 7th day. She has to wait until the night after the 7th day. And now the issue is, what's the status of a boel nida who's also tameh 7 days? Says Rabbi Zera, boel nida kinida. If you're going to assume that there's an exact identification between a boel nida and a nida, which means that we need all 7 days to pass before tvila is a possibility, then we have a problem with the case of a Kohen Gadol who is Baal Ishto on the day of Prisha. Because if that be the case, let's say the Kohen Gadol was Baal Ishto on Yom HaPrisha, the very day that he was called upon to be porridge, but on that day itself, he had a relationship with her, which is fine, right, technically, and she turns out to be a nida. That, therefore, his status as Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira is that of a safek boel nida. If that be the case, then the day of Hafrasha is the first day of his tumah. Is Emas Tavil. When would he go to mikvah? Bilayla, on the night of Yom Kippur. Why? Because if the Yom HaPrisha is counted as 1 day, then he counts 7 days and he arrives at Erev Yom Kippur. Erev Yom Kippur is going to be his 7th day. Now, when is he going to mikvah? It all depends. do we say Boel Nida Kinida? If Boel Nida Kinida, then he cannot go to mikvah on the seventh day, meaning on Erev Yom Kippur. Why? Because Nida has a special status in Hilchas Tumah. She has to wait until after the seventh day until she can be Tovelis. She's Tmeya all 7 days in the most intense kind of Tumah that doesn't even allow a Tvila. Is there from Malayla. The earliest time that he could go to mikvah would be the night of Yom Kippurim. Well, okay, so let him go to mikvah the night of Yom Kippurim. He wakes up the next day, it's Yom Kippur, he'll do the avodah. Name. He needs what's called Harev Shemesh. When a Tvila could only be effective after nightfall, meaning the Torah always requires that from the time of Tefillah there be nightfall. If he was Toveles on the 8th day, which means in this particular scenario on Motzi Yom Kippur, then he didn't have Herav Shemesh. He needs Herav Shemesh after his Tefillah. That would mean that during the course of Yom Kippurim, he's Tameh. Haboy Harav Shemesh. The only way that we can justify Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseir's understanding of Prisha for 7 days based on Safek Boel Nida is if we assume that Boel Nida Eina Kenida V'tovel Bayom, that it's a low level of Tumah. The Boel is not on the same high level of Tumah as the Nida is concerned, but rather he falls into the more generic character and category of Tumah. And that means that before Herav Shemesh on the very last day, he can go to mikvah, and then he gets Herav Shemesh when the sun sets that night, and he's taught. So now, if he had an intimate relations right before the Prisha began, and now we're afraid that he was Boel Nida, he's got 7 days until the night of Yom Kippur. On that 7th day, which is Erev Yom Kippur, he can go to mikvah, and then he has Herav Shemesh, and he's taught. Why? Because Boel Nida ain't a Nida. Elav Shmamina Boel Nida ain't a Nida, and therefore he can be Tovel on the 7th day of his Tumah, and therefore it's enough that we're mafresh the Kohen Gadol, the Yafrishus Kohen Gadol Shivas Yom Kodem Yom Kippurim, because if he became Tomei on that very day when he had a Be'ilah, then he can be Tovel on Erev Yom Kippurim. He has Herav Shemesh at the night, and then he's allowed to do the Avodah on the Yom Kippurim in the Mikdash. And now the Gemara is going to reject Rabbi Yisrael. Rabbi Shimi bin Ardoy Omar Afilu Tema Bol Nida Kenida. You know what? We're going to solve this problem. Mafreshina le Shah Achas Samuch L'Shkia Sachama. What we're going to do is we're going to separate him from his wife 1 hour before Yom Kippur. And what that means is that even if in the worst case scenario, he became Tameh B'Be'ilas Nida on the very day that he was Poresh, he could be Tovel on the night of Yom Kippur, Erev Yom Kippur at night, because that's going to be the 8th day of his Tumah. So by the time he gets to Yom Kippur, he already had Harav Shemesh. Even if I hold that Boel Nidas Kenida, then we can still have a situation where he will count 7 days, and we add that little period of time that he was Porei Shach Asamach L'Shkia Sachama, and that allows him, after 7 days of 24 hours times 7, to go to mikvah right before Shkia Sachama. And therefore he has Herav Shemesh.
He can go before nightfall, correct?
In this case, if he was Poresh Shah Achas Somach L'Shkia, he can go to the mikvah before nightfall, even if I hold Boel Nida Kenida. Because on the 8th day, we're going to be mafresh him before Yom Kippur Shah Achas. So if we go back in time 7 days, then he was already Poresh 7 days before then, So now, no matter how you slice the cake, he could go to mikveh, he could be a tovel on Erev Yom Kippurim, such that now, with nightfall of Yom Kippurim, which is the 8th day through his tumah, he already has Hariv Shemesh. Meisvei. The Gemara has the following kasha on Rav Shimi. Kol chayvei tvilos. Tvilos on bayom. We have a brisa that says that in all cases of chayvei tvilos, they can be tovel bayom, meaning on the last day of the tumah. They don't have to wait till Erev Shemesh. Chutz minida v'yoledes shetvilos b'layla. In the cases of nida and yoledes is really a tumah that's equal to nida, and we have to wait until the full 7 days pass before the nida could go to mikvah. And the rule of biyom tvilasa and biyom achron shel tumah, they could be a yom tvila, that doesn't apply to nida. So the Gemara now is medayek from the language of the brisa. Nida in, boel nida lo. Why did the Mishnah, why did the brisa mention nida and not mention boel nida? It would have been a bigger chiddush to tell me that a boel nida cannot be tovel on the 7th day of his tumah. From the fact that the Mishnah mentions nida and omits any mention of boel nida, we derive the conclusion that a boel nida could be tovel during the day, the last day of his tumah. Whereas Rav Shimi was assuming that boel nida's kid nida, and he cannot be tovel on the 7th day. I'm sorry. And I got it right. And he cannot be tovel on the 7th day. Here you see that a nida cannot be tovel on the 7th day, but a boel nida can be tovel. Gemara answers, no, that's not a kasha. Why? Nida v'chol diasi biribuye. Anyone who comes from that tumas nida, for example, the boel nida, who became tummy because of a nida, is included in what the brisa says, tvilas and balayim. Meisvei, another kash on Rav Shimi. We have a Mishnah in Masechet Zavin, Balkeri, Kimaga, Sheretz. A Balkeri has the same status as someone who touches a dead sheretz. Means that he's what's called a tful yom. He can go to mikvah on that day, and he just has to wait till Hariv Shemesh. Boel nida ki tmei mes. Interesting. Boel nida ki tmei mes. Why didn't the brisa say? I mean, the Mishnah that boel nida is kinida. What does it mean, boel nida ki tmei mes? My love, it means litvila. That just like a tomei mes is allowed to go to mikvah on the 7th day of his tumah, and he's tovel b'yom shvi, and he has the same status as a tomei sheretz, who also goes to mikvah. He doesn't count 7 days, but on the day that he became tomei. And here the brisa says that a boel nida has the same din as a tomei mes, who is tovel b'yom shvi. And you just told me, Rav Shimi, that a boel nida has the same status of a nida, meaning he cannot be tovel on Yom Shvi. So the Gemara rejects and says, lo, litum asan. What the brisa, what the Mishnah is talking about is not the zman tefillah, but the tumah itself. That a balkeri is tumah 1 day, and he has the same status as a nogea b'sheretz. He's what you call a rishon l'tumah, and that means he's mitame ochlin umashkim and not other mekalim, like a tomei sheretz. A boel nida is tomei shivas yomim. He is an avatuma, and he is mitame other mekalim, like a tomei mes. But as far as when he can go to be tovel, what day, here there's a fundamental difference between boel nida and tomei mes. A tomei mes can go to tefillah on the 7th day, but a boel nida cannot. So the Gemara immediately raises the following objection. Awesome the hedgeksibu. Do I need a brisa to tell me that a boel nida is tame shivas yomim like a tame mess? I tuma shiva ksibe. The Torah writes explicitly, we quoted it earlier today. Utehini das Allah, v'tame shivas yomim. That if a man has a relation with a nida, he's tame for 7 days. Bahai tuma shiva ksibe. And in the case of tame mess, the Torah also likewise says explicitly in Parshas Chukas, "Anogeh b'mesachol nefesh adam v'tamei shivas yomim." So why would the Mishnah feel compelled to repeat to tell me that which is explicit in the Torah, that a tame, that a boil nida is tame for 7 days, and a nogeh the mess is tame shivas yomim? I mean, that's explicit. That's explicit in the Torah.